Sweet. Yeah, this is another game that's worth it right off the bat. If you click this and you're wondering, hey, should I buy another Crab's Treasure? The answer is yes. Unless you've never played Dark Souls and you've never played a Souls-like, then maybe not, unless you want a challenge. But another Crab's Treasure is a unique Souls-like in that I think there's a lot more difficulty and accessibility options than almost any of the other Souls-likes, meaning I know you can even get a handgun and one-shot stuff. So I should amend that and say this is worth it if you're a Souls-like player, right? And you like those kind of games, and you don't mind what I find to be a pro, which is the super unique graphic / goofy, cartoony, what you see on the screen. But secondly, if you've been thinking about getting into Souls-likes, this is not a bad option. I don't know if it's the perfect one, given that there are parts of it significantly harder than other parts. And, actually, I think I take that back. I'm not the best Souls player in the world, and I didn't struggle much with any of the bosses. I didn't use any of the accessibility stuff, and I didn't try particularly hard to optimize my build / items. So, if you're only going to watch 30 seconds of this, I think you should take away this is worth the money. And just kudos to Aggro Crab. Aggro Crab is the team that made this. I think it's 12 or 13 people, maybe only 1 or 2 real devs doing the programming, which is so cool. I know Billy Basso built Animal Well as a one guy, but that was a 2D platformer that was maybe a third. I don't want to give any spoilers away as to the length of either Animal Well or this game, but this is an impressive feat for a small team, and it's got so much heart and character and quite a lot to love about the environment, the storytelling, all the traditional categories that go into a video game. I think that another Crab's Treasure is worth it. I do think that there are some cons I'll get into, but they're not big enough to not play the game. You know what I mean? There's nothing here that gives me any sort of pause recommending it to anybody if it's already kind of your thing. So, yeah. I think that if you have played Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, Elden Ring, Sekiro, and everything, I don't know. I could see how somebody wouldn't like this. And almost purely based on the way the combat feels, I personally dug it and was fine with it. But it definitely is lacking the polish that you get in something like Elden Ring. Any of the Dark Souls games. It's not the same, obviously, right? And you're not. It's silly to expect that, both from a small team and given that some of the appeal here is clearly what separates it from the Souls games, not what makes it the same, right? And for me, the draw of playing what kind of felt to me like an N64 platformer plus Dark Souls, that's enough, right? I'm in. I'm buying it. Plus, I love cartoony stuff. I love irreverent tones, which this has. And I was really pleasantly surprised how clever a lot of the environmental storytelling was. Clearly, no spoilers, this is a game set where you're witnessing I wanted to say ravagement, but you're witnessing the degradation of the ocean due to human pollution, and you're consistently impressed with clever little jokes all around you in the storytelling, characters' clothing. One girl is wearing a salt bag as her dress. That one always made me chuckle. So I don't know, that stuff alone makes me want to buy the game. And the fact that I also love Souls-likes, it's this is sort of exactly what I want in a video game. And yeah, there's really, to continue just sort of praising it, right, before I get into any cons, any real cons, which, again, the combat's probably the biggest thing that I would say would keep a Souls-like person from getting this, is it just doesn't have the same feeling. The floatiness of it, maybe I freaking love parrying. That's in my jam in all Souls games. Or really any game you can parry, I want to do it, right? And parrying, the timing was pretty damn hard to pull off, and it didn't feel particularly good. I would say the same thing goes with dodging. They have a dodge mechanic where you do like a quick dodge and then you can counterattack if you pull it off well. So it's like similar to a parry but different. And same thing where the timing, it never clicked in the same way that other Souls games do. But this is a lot of cons to say. Like to say I felt that it's was done well enough to be a solid entry. And then when you add all of the other unique bits of character and heart that the game has, you get something rad. And yeah, I guess, well, I guess actually I'm just doing the cons first. So here's the other big con for me. So if we take out that it's a Souls-like, right, and everything that goes into that, you know, as far as combat and RPG elements and weapons, etc., I think like the story, if they could have tweaked or spent some more time, I want to say like moving around or emphasizing certain parts of the story over others. There could have been a really moving and memorable through line here, and I feel like they missed the mark there. So, but not entirely. Like I found myself rooting for Krill, the main character. The only real plot line you get in the beginning is your shell gets stolen from some, you know, jackass, and you want to go get your shell back. But quickly you find out there's something else going on in the ocean because, and yeah, you slowly, a plot begins to unfurl. And what weirdly though about this game is like the last 30%, 25% were the strongest in almost every way, certainly in like boss mechanics and interesting boss fights for sure, the last like quarter of it. And that's a real shame. But weirdly enough, so was like character development, character interaction, even just interest in other characters, like setting them up. The end had like the characters and the characters themselves, sub-characters, as well as Krill's main character arc. If they had been better set up prior, I feel like the ending would have really hit. Well, I'll caveat, not the very end. The way the game ends is a separate conversation. But I would say that last 30% or so could have been fucking super awesome. Like the kind of awesome that I won't forget. I don't feel that way, though, about Another Crab's Treasure. So I don't know. There are games where I know they're going to sit with me and I'm going to think back to them, right? That's not true here. But I almost felt like it could have been had, they spent more time getting you attached and dug into the characters earlier. And another issue there related with the way the game actually fully ends is that like, I don't know. I think the ending fell flat to me and it felt very rushed. I think probably they were rushed, literally, right? It's a small team. And again, this is no shade to them. Like what they've done here is sweet. It's rad. It's funny. It's interesting. It's engaging. It's not perfect, but I don't think it's trying to be, you know? But man, if they could have sat with the ending a bit more and tuned it, because I think the boss fights were sick. I think the environments you get in at the end were sick. Like there was a lot of momentum. It kind of felt like they were building this, like all of a sudden, sort of, right? In that last quarter, I felt like, whoa, the momentum is really getting here. But then rather than like crashing into something, right, with weight, I don't know, like an explosion. I just blew out the mic. It kind of just like petered out, you know, the rolling stone of momentum just like, man, just kind of like blank to me at the very end. But not enough to not recommend it. And I guess I'm still thinking of cons, so another one comes to mind. I do feel like, too, and this might be just a personal gaming preference, the platforming / environment, I got kind of like, I just wanted to get to the next boss fight. But the reason I say that might be just me is I feel that way even in Elden Ring, you know, like even in, I mean, Sekiro was pretty short level design, so that's different. But in any Souls game I've played, almost always I am on the side of get me to the boss faster than like wanting to die and explore more of the actual level. And I think that's me in most games. You know, I just love a good boss fight. So like, yeah, I don't know, take that for what you will. But I definitely like the last large zone, the last couple large zones. I just sped through because I was like, dude, I don't want to like poke around and search anymore for like new. And I almost, yeah, I almost never do that anyway. You know, Elden Ring, I probably did the same thing. All the Dark Souls. Toward the end, I stopped like exploring that much because I just want to get to the next fight. I do feel like, especially so here, they could have really trimmed down what they're trying to do level design wise because it's so cute and clever and fun a lot of the time. Like it's a joy to explore. Had it been maybe each of the zones 30% less, there were a couple zones in particular where I was like, okay, this could be like quite a bit less, maybe even half as large, especially because it must have been such a huge feat to pull this off with such a small team. It reminds me of like if you ever played Classic WoW, it's bonkers to me that in Classic WoW they released the version 1 of the game with like an incredible world size. Like the size of Classic WoW for when it came out for being one of the early MMOs, it's insane the depth and size of the world. But then you look at a class like Retribution Paladin or a large number of the other classes, and they have like 1 or 2 button rotations. And it's like, okay, they should have siphoned some of that world that could have come later and moved those people onto the class design. And I feel like that could totally have benefited here, where like you pull some of the people that are building these awesome levels, and they are awesome, but you reduce that scope and think, okay, maybe let's add a couple more weapon types, for instance, because you only have the fork here. You don't have that's it. Now you can modify the fork to make it into like a hammer, which hell yeah, I did that as soon as I could. Who doesn't like bonking things, right? But you know, that's like one area I could have seen them spending more time in. I think they could have done a little bit more with this, for sure, with like the energized skills you get. You get in the bottom right, you can see I have 1, but like, or 2, you know, you have 1 or 2 open or whatever. And I actually never found out on the bottom right how you swap. Like, that was not intuitive. Maybe you couldn't. But anyway. So there were other parts that were half-baked. Another thing that... in a same sort of vein where I loved the look of the map, like it had this hand drawn feel that was just awesome. But the fact that you can scroll around was bizarre to me. The map is static and you don't have much of a view. So it's like, dude, what in the hell? Like, this is such a cool map. And you can actually buy a blanket on their store with the map for like $140, which I literally thought about buying because of just how sick that map looks. Like, it looks sick. Honestly, I might buy that. I need a blanket for my office. Anyway. So, yeah. I'm just talked a lot about stuff I didn't like, but it was in the sense, like, the way I feel about things I didn't fully enjoy about Another Crab's Treasure is it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, man, if only... You know, it's because I liked it so much that the things that I didn't like, I was like maybe particularly bummed by, because I just think they did do so much right, and I did have such a genuinely good time playing most of this game that it was like, oh man, this was like a solid 7, right? But boy, it could have been a 9, you know, had they spent some more time in some certain areas. But again, with the size of team they had, and I'm sure like the finances of this must have been really hard to pull off, I ultimately give it a glowing review. I honestly do think too that I'm thinking about like pollution of the ocean more than I will. I think it will have opened my mind a bit, because obviously it's a thing I agree exists and it's horrible, but it's not like I think about it. But I think like this is it does what it's trying to do, and environmentally speaking, extremely well, in my opinion. Like, I don't know that they could have been that much more clever and interesting environmentally speaking with what they're trying to tie it into the messaging. I think also, though, like, almost suffers from the same thing, which is kind of the same point with the level design. Like, there's a big city that feels, you know, kind of half-baked and too big than it needs to be. So my hunch is like there was a single person whose job it was, and they were just fucking good at like creating large spaces. And yeah, it could have been trimmed down more, even the city hub kind of thing. But yeah, so right, how many games look like they're from N64 era, play like a Souls-like, are funny, creative, have a fairly moving story the kind of story where you're like, that could have almost been an awesome, I don't know, you know what I've already made that point that like they were approaching something moving here, but didn't quite land it. Yeah, I don't know. It's unique. It's great. Support it. Play it. And I am going to definitely be on the lookout for whatever Aggro Crab does next. I feel like they're the kind of studio that are going to learn from this, you know, and continue to expand on their strengths, and hopefully they'll learn from their weaknesses. I feel like they're small enough, agile enough, like lean enough team where that's very possible. And yeah, I'll end on a couple high moments for me. So I've already mentioned, but I would say the boss fights were like pretty good, but not great until like the last quarter. Again, like ended really strong. I had a lot of fun with the last boss fights. You know, I've played most of the Souls games, and I died like a good number of times on a good number of bosses. So it wasn't so easy. I was just one-shotting stuff. I have a hunch, though, if you really spent time hacking your items and your RPG elements, like you could maybe get overpowered. But I certainly never got overpowered, though. Like I was always, and I think they do that by design. Like I don't feel like you can out-level this game very easily. I think if you need an easier time, they want you to use the accessibility options, because I had a shit ton of attack, and I was doing a decent amount at the end of the game, but it only was because I like leaned heavily into the hammer damage. So I don't know, like, anyway. The last couple zones were standout. I think the first hour or two is really great, but again, like, minor spoilers here for the first few hours, but there's this really cool, like, queen lady, and you think that the plot line is starting with her, but really she's just this sub-minor character, and none of that kind of ends up mattering. None of the characters you meet in the first few hours, none of the characters matter until you a few hours in and you get to the main city hub, but by then it almost felt a little too late. Like, yeah, anyway, I've kind of beaten that point, but yeah, and I think too, the stuff where, and again, this is spoilers for like the last 30%, so 40%. So turn this shit off if you care. But I think too that they were doing something here with like the god of the ocean, where there's like a spiritual presence, and it felt a bit half baked to me too. Like they tried it. I think it was cool, but like there was a bit too many moving pieces story wise, where like it's like, okay, who's this god person that's controlling people, versus there's the anti-capitalist message, which I haven't talked about, and I think it lands pretty well. I think it felt maybe a bit juvenile, or like maybe a little bit too like teenager fighting back against the machine, but not so much that it turned me off. I still really liked it. I still think that what it's trying to say is interesting and thought-provoking, and it's not going so over the top or silly that you're rolling your eyes. But yeah, I don't know. It's like humans bad, dumping trash in the ocean is what am I trying to say? There's not much nuance to it, but I don't know that they could have made it more nuanced, because you're playing in the polluted ocean. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Like, are they going to really talk about the complexities of capitalism, or I think I'm talking myself into realizing that it's a game that's using this interesting and unique take on human pollution and human due to capitalism, and it's super clever that the ocean, the characters, the people in the ocean have started using that as trash. And again, spoilers for the last 25% of the game here, but I thought the reveal that the treasure that everybody was so desperately searching for was just money, but it has no use. I thought that was really great. There's some really solid moments there, and it's like, damn, if they could have been just like more connected or more cohesive, yeah, it could have been really, really great. Anyway, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover here. I am, yeah, I would say the voice acting. There were a few times where the sound. Oh, I would say probably the strongest con for me in the first half of the game, if not the entire game, was the music. So not the voice acting. I thought the voice acting was fine, maybe not the best, but fine. But man, there were some zones where the music just like it did not match, and it made it like I think it's totally okay to make a game like this where it's clearly indie. It's a callback to 3D platformers plus Souls-likes, but like, yeah, the music can't also sound like somebody was just fucking around in GarageBand, and that's sort of what it felt like for a good number of the zones. It was like somebody was just messing around here and doing some like basic ass beat. I don't know. It wasn't like that all the time, but I'm a pretty big music head, so it took me, and I think most people would probably feel this way, where I felt like I was taken out by the environment music, and that's something you never want, right? If anything, you want to just not notice it. But yeah, so to not end on a negative note, the list of things that Aggro Crab has done well or exceeded at for a small team is impressive. It should be lauded. They should be financially compensated for this, right? They should be able to make livable wages on what they've produced here and continue to make cool games. There's a ton that's right, and yeah, I'm fundamentally glad I spent the time and money that I did. And what more can you want from something, right? Right on. Way to go, Aggro Crab.